My name is Hailey Monroe. I'm 25 years old and a barista by day, freelance illustrator by night. I live in a quiet little apartment in the same Colorado town I grew up in, where everything smells faintly of pine and wet pavement in the fall. If you asked anyone in my family to describe me, they'd probably say, the quiet one, artsy, or, a bit sensitive. But if you'd asked my grandma Jean, she would have looked you dead in the eye and said, Hailey, she's got steel in her bones. Just watch. Grandma was the one person who really saw me. When I was little and everyone else was too busy praising my older sister Tessa for her spelling bee trophies or her dance recitals, Grandma would sneak me into her garden and let me dig for worms just because she knew I loved it. She didn't expect me to shine. She just let me exist. And that was everything. Tessa and I were never close. She's 2 years older, all polished and poised, with her picture-perfect Instagram life and a knack for always being the center of attention. My mom called her the golden child, and even though she never said it out loud, it was always clear who was supposed to shine in our family. Tessa could do no wrong. Meanwhile, I was just Hailey. When Grandma Jean passed away last fall, something in me fractured. It wasn't sudden, she'd been sick for a while, but that didn't make it easier. I remember the last time I saw her, curled up under her favorite quilt in the hospital, her hand in mine. Her voice was soft, but her eyes were still sharp. Promise me, Hailey, she said, don't let them take everything. You know who I mean. I nodded, not fully understanding what she meant at the time. But I do now. After the funeral, everything felt wrong. I stayed late at the church, helping pack up the leftover food and flowers, and when I finally drove to Grandma's house, Tessa was already there, sitting in the living room with a glass of wine like she owned the place. The lace doilies were still on the armrests, the old cuckoo clock still ticking like it didn't know the world had changed. Tessa turned to me with this practiced solemn look. You know, she always said I'd be the one to handle things when she passed, she said. I blinked. What are you talking about? I've been named executor, she said, with that sugar-slick voice that always made me want to scream. I already talked to Mr. Lanning. It's all official. I couldn't even speak. Grandma had never mentioned this. She and I talked about everything, every regret, every plan. She always told me I had a good head on my shoulders, that I could be trusted. So why would she put Tessa in charge? Tessa didn't stop there. She started rummaging through boxes, making piles labeled donate and sell, and acting like I was just a guest in the one place that had ever felt like home. I watched as she put Grandma's favorite china into a box without a second thought. The final blow came 3 days later. I came by after work, just wanting to sit on the back porch where Grandma used to drink tea and watch the birds. Tessa was already there, phone in hand, talking to a real estate agent. I think we can list it for more, she said, barely glancing up at me. Grandma's house has good bones, and the market's hot. What are you doing? I asked, my voice cracking. She shrugged. Selling it. We'll split the money. It's the smart thing to do. No, I said, heart pounding. She told me she wanted it to stay in the family. She told me that. Tessa gave me a look I'll never forget, half pity, half amusement. People say things when they're dying, Hailey. Doesn't mean they're thinking clearly. That night, I sat in my car outside the house and cried so hard I couldn't breathe. But after the tears dried, something else settled in, determination. Grandma had prepared me for this. Maybe not with exact instructions, but with lessons. She taught me to be patient, to listen, and to pay attention, especially when people underestimated me. So the next morning, I made a call to Mr. Lanning, Grandma's lawyer. And what he told me changed everything. When Mr. Lanning picked up the phone, his voice was calm, measured, just like I remembered from the estate meetings we'd attended when Grandpa died. He always called me kiddo, even though I hadn't been one for years. Hailey, he said, I figured you'd be calling soon. That surprised me. Did Grandma say something to you about Tessa? He was quiet for a second. Your grandmother was a very perceptive woman. She had her suspicions about how things might unfold. My heart thudded. Did she really make Tessa the executor? She did, he confirmed. Last spring. But there it was. The pause. The pivot. But she also added a codicil to her will. A private one. I leaned against my kitchen counter, barely breathing. What kind of codicil? The house. She left it to you. Not jointly. Not to both of you. Solely and explicitly to you, Hailey. I sank to the floor, my knees too weak to hold me. What? Are you sure? She gave me specific instructions to hold that part of the will privately until either you asked or Tessa attempted to sell the property. She said, quote, "It'll be the moment Hailey knows she has to step forward." My hand flew to my mouth. That was so like her. Always thinking 10 steps ahead. Always quietly protecting me. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice catching. "Thank you for telling me." "There's more," he said, his tone shifting. "She also left you a letter. It's in my office safe. I think you should read it before you decide what to do next." I went that afternoon. Mr. Lanning's office hadn't changed in years, same smell of polished wood and old paper, same humming desk fan that barely stirred the air. He handed me a cream envelope with my name written in Grandma's unmistakable script. It was thick. I held it like it might crumble in my hands. I opened it right there in his office. "My sweet Hailey. If you're reading this, then Tessa's probably already made her move. I know you, and I know your heart, you never ask for more than you need, and you always try to see the best in people. Even when they don't deserve it. Especially your sister. But there are things I never told you. Things I wish I hadn't kept to myself, but I did it to protect you. Tessa has always believed love was something she had to earn with control. You never needed to earn it. You just are. That's why I knew you had to be the one to keep this house. It's not just wood and brick, it's your anchor. Don't let her take from you what is yours. With all my love. Grandma Jean." I read it 3 times, tears streaking my face. Mr. Lanning gave me space, didn't say a word, just handed me a tissue and a copy of the updated will. That night, I drove to Grandma's house. Tessa was inside, rearranging furniture like she'd already moved in. She barely looked up when I walked in. "I have something to show you," I said, my voice even. "What now?" she sighed, still scrolling through her phone. I dropped the legal envelope on the table between us. "It's from Mr. Lanning. You might want to read it before you go calling any more real estate agents." She looked at it. Didn't touch it. "What is this supposed to be?" "It's the truth," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "The house belongs to me." Her face twisted, something between disbelief and anger. "You're lying. Ask the lawyer. And read the letter if you want to know why." She didn't take it well. But I didn't care anymore. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't scared to stand my ground. Grandma had prepared me for this. Tessa called me a thief. Right there in the middle of Grandma's kitchen, our kitchen, now mine, she slammed her hand on the table, sending the envelope sliding across the wood and said, "You always were good at playing the victim, Hailey. I should have known you'd pull something like this." I didn't flinch. I didn't pull anything. Grandma made her choice. She saw through you, even if no one else did. Tessa's eyes narrowed. "Don't pretend like you're better than me. You never even visited her the last few months she was sick." I did. That one stung. Because it was true, at least on the surface. I hadn't been there in the physical sense. But I'd talked to Grandma every day, FaceTimed her from work, sent groceries to her door when she was too tired to cook. I stayed away because she asked me to. Because she didn't want Tessa knowing she was still talking to me. "She didn't want to see you fighting over her," I said quietly. She knew what would happen if we were both in the room. Tessa laughed, bitter and hollow. You really think this is about the house? About money? I raised an eyebrow. Isn't it? No. It's about you always needing to be the underdog. The misunderstood martyr. You've spent your whole life acting like I got everything handed to me when you were the one she actually loved. I blinked. For a second, the rage in her voice broke into something else. Pain. That kind of pain that sits just under the skin, always waiting to boil over. She did love me, I said. And she loved you too. But love doesn't mean letting someone bulldoze through everything just because they can. Tessa turned her back, gripping the counter so hard her knuckles turned white. You think you won, don't you? I didn't answer. She eventually left, muttering something about contesting the will, but I knew she wouldn't. Not because she didn't want to, but because deep down, she knew she'd lost more than the house. She'd lost the illusion of being untouchable. That night, I stayed in Grandma's house for the first time since the funeral. It was quiet. Too quiet. I walked through the rooms barefoot, trailing my fingers along the banisters she used to polish with lemon oil, stepping over the creaky floorboard she always warned us about. I found one of her old cardigans draped over the arm of her favorite chair and wrapped it around my shoulders. It still smelled like her. I sat down in the sunroom, the place where she used to keep her bird feeders, and cried until my ribs hurt. Not just because she was gone, but because of everything that was still left unsaid between me and Tessa. How had we ended up like this? Two sisters raised under the same roof, but on completely different planets. I spent the next week slowly sorting through Grandma's things. Every drawer felt like a time capsule. I found letters she'd written but never sent, recipes scrawled in shorthand only I could decipher, and tucked inside one of her journals, a photograph of the two of us from when I was 5. She'd written on the back, "This girl will surprise them all." I smiled through my tears. She had always believed in me. Even when I didn't believe in myself. The night after I found the photo, Tessa called. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask how I was. She just said, "I hope the house makes you happy." Then she hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, feeling a strange mix of relief and grief. Maybe we were too far gone. Maybe some relationships can't be patched. But for once, I wasn't the one trying to fix it. I didn't have to be. Because Grandma prepared me for this. It took me nearly a month to sort through everything in Grandma's house. Not just her belongings, but her legacy, the invisible threads she left behind in corners I hadn't looked at in years. Every object had a story. The chipped teacup from her college roommate, the faded Afghan she crocheted during chemo, even the rusty gardening shears still hanging in the shed. I kept thinking about how many hours she spent in these rooms, quietly living a life that shaped me more than I ever realized. During one of those long afternoons, I found something I hadn't expected. It was in the attic, stuffed in a dusty file box labeled simply, Hailey. Inside were things I didn't even know she'd kept, drawings I made in elementary school, birthday cards with my crooked handwriting, a dried corsage from my prom that she must have snuck out of the trash. At the very bottom, there was a folder. Inside it? A letter. This one wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to Tessa. It wasn't sealed, so I read it. I don't know if that was right or wrong, but I did. Dear Tessa. If you're reading this, then you're probably angry. Maybe even heartbroken. I know how much you hate feeling left out, overlooked, or less than. I also know you believe I favored Hailey. And in some ways, you're right. But not because she was better. Because she needed it more. You always found your way, Tessa, sometimes by charm, sometimes by force, but always with your eyes on what you wanted. Hailey, though? She was always looking for where she belonged. That house, this family, it was her compass. I gave it to her not to take from you, but to give her something she could build on. You've had many things. Let this be hers. Love. Grandma. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the folder. I didn't call Tessa. I didn't tell her about the letter. Not yet. Because I needed to figure out what I wanted. I spent the next few days repainting the guest bedroom. It had always been too dark, with its faded burgundy walls. I chose a pale sage green, calming, open, honest. I opened all the windows and let the light back in. Some days I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to text Grandma, only to stop halfway through the motion, my fingers curling around nothing. Grief is a strange thing, it doesn't announce itself. It just shows up like fog, soft but suffocating. One morning, I was baking banana bread in her kitchen, using her stained recipe card with the measurements scratched out and rewritten a dozen times, when there was a knock on the door. It was Tessa. She looked smaller. Tired. Less like the woman who tried to bulldoze me out of my inheritance and more like my sister. The one who used to braid my hair before school when Mom was running late. The one who once punched a boy in 5th grade for calling me weird. I didn't come to fight, she said. I didn't move from the doorway. Then why are you here? She hesitated. Because I was wrong. Not about everything. But about enough. I let her in. She didn't apologize, not exactly. But she told me she'd started therapy. That she'd talked to Mr. Lanning. That she'd read the letter. I hated you for getting the house, she admitted, standing in the middle of the living room, twisting her rings the way she always did when she was nervous. But not because I wanted it. Because I wanted to matter to her the way you did. You did, I said. Just, differently. She nodded, wiping at her eyes. I know that now. We sat on the porch for a long time, watching the birds. It wasn't a full reconciliation. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And maybe that was enough. That night, I lit a candle in Grandma's favorite lantern and placed it in the window. A way of saying thank you. She had prepared me for this. It's strange how silence can feel like safety. After Tessa left that day, I sat in the living room long after the porch light clicked off. The house was still, peaceful, in a way it hadn't been in weeks. But under the stillness, there was something else. A quiet ache. Not for what I'd lost, but for what never really existed. I think I had always hoped Tessa and I would one day find our way back to being sisters. Real sisters. Not just women linked by blood and circumstance. And that moment on the porch, when she admitted she was wrong, felt like a crack in the wall between us. But I also knew one conversation didn't undo years of rivalry, hurt, and silence. The next morning, I started something I'd been putting off, going through Grandma's finances. It felt intrusive, like I was reading her diary. But I needed to understand what I was working with. What I found floored me. She'd been saving. Not just for her retirement or for the house. For me. There was a fund in my name I'd never known about, small, but steady, and growing quietly in a separate account. Notes in her handwriting detailed contributions, for Hailey's future. Not for now, but for when she's ready. I stared at the ledger for a long time, blinking back tears. She'd never mentioned it. Not once. She'd trusted me to find it when I needed it, to understand what it meant. I called Mr. Lanning later that day. Did you know about the fund? I asked. He chuckled softly. Jean made me swear not to mention it. Said you'd find it when the time was right. Well, I said, I found it. Then she was right again, he said. That night, I sat at the dining room table with all the documents spread out in front of me. The weight of it wasn't just the money, it was the faith she had in me. That I would use it for something good. Something mine. So I started dreaming. A little cafe, maybe, with a bookstore tucked in the back. A place where people could slow down, sip tea, feel held. It wasn't just a business idea, it was a life I could see myself stepping into. A life that wasn't defined by what Tessa did or didn't do, or by who our parents thought deserved more. It was mine. I jotted notes into a spiral notebook, just like Grandma used to when she was planning her garden. And every idea, every line I wrote felt like a thread tying me back to her. A few days later, Tessa called. "I've been thinking," she said. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I'd like to help." "Help with what?" "With the house. Repairs, maybe. Or the garden. I know you want to keep it how Grandma had it." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no, to protect the fragile piece I'd built. But another part remembered the way Tessa looked that day on the porch, raw and unsure. "Okay," I said. "But just the garden. For now." She laughed, a little breathlessly. "Fair." We started slow. A few afternoons weeding, replanting Grandma's rosemary bush, cleaning out the shed. She didn't push. She didn't pretend we were suddenly best friends. She just showed up, sweat on her brow, dirt under her nails, like she meant it. And in those quiet hours, between pruning and planting, I started to see her not as the sister who tried to take everything, but as someone trying to find her way back. And maybe, just maybe, Grandma knew we both needed that garden more than we realized. By mid-spring, the garden was blooming again. It wasn't quite like Grandma's, her touch was irreplaceable, but it was alive, full of promise. Lavender, sage, and that stubborn old hydrangea bush she'd nursed through 4 winters were all thriving. Tessa and I had even rebuilt the little wooden bench that used to sit under the elm tree. We didn't talk much while we worked. But the silence wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was restorative. One afternoon, while we were untangling vines from the trellis, Tessa asked, "Do you remember the time we tried to camp in the backyard and lasted all of 30 minutes? I laughed. "You cried because you thought you saw a raccoon." "I cried because I forgot my sketch pad." "We both ran inside screaming," she added, smiling. It was the first time in years we'd shared a memory without it turning bitter. For a brief moment, we were just sisters again, 2 girls who grew up in this house, under this sky, with the same stubborn grandmother watching over us. I still hadn't told Tessa about the fund. Part of me wanted to. But a bigger part wanted to keep it quiet, just a little longer. It felt sacred, like a final whisper from Grandma, meant for me alone. Then one Saturday, I drove to a spot just outside town where a small storefront had gone up for sale. It used to be a sewing shop, years ago. Now it sat empty, sunlight slanting across the hardwood floors through dusty windows. I stood there with the keys in my hand, heart pounding like it was my first day of school. I could see it. The cafe, the little bookshelves, the mismatched chairs, the kind of place that felt like a hug when you walked through the door. Grandma used to say, people don't always need advice, they need a place to sit, something warm to drink, and someone to listen. I wanted to create that place. I called Mr. Lanning. Told him I was ready to use the fund. He didn't hesitate. "She'd be proud of you, kiddo." A few weeks later, Tessa and I were sitting on the porch, sipping lemonade, when I told her. "Grandma left me a fund," I said. "It was separate from everything else. I just found it recently." Her eyes widened. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I wasn't ready. And honestly, I was afraid it'd turn into another fight." She nodded slowly, her face unreadable. "I'm using it to open a cafe," I said, watching her reaction carefully. "Books, tea, maybe some baked goods if I don't burn them." Tessa smiled, small and sincere. "That sounds like you. Really like you." We sat in silence after that, the kind of silence that says more than words ever could. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself. She didn't offer to help. She didn't offer advice. She just sat beside me, like a sister should. That night, I took out the notebook where I'd been sketching ideas for the cafe. On the first page, I wrote in big letters. Jean's house, a place to feel at home. Because no matter where I went from here, everything started with Grandma's house. Her wisdom. Her love. Her quiet preparations. The morning of the grand opening, I woke up at 4:37 a.m. with my heart hammering like I was being chased. I stood in the middle of my new cafe, Jean's house, barefoot, with sleep creases on my cheek and paint still stuck under my nails, staring at the space that had once been nothing more than a dream scribbled in a notebook. The windows caught the first blush of sunlight, casting long golden streaks across the mismatched tables I'd salvaged and repainted by hand. The chalkboard menu was smudged where I'd changed herbal tea to Grandma's Garden Blend at the last second. I could still smell the lavender from the sachets I'd tucked behind the shelves, just like she used to do in her linen closet. It was imperfect. And completely mine. By 7:30, I had a line forming outside. People I'd grown up with. A few old friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Even some of the ladies from Grandma's book club, their silver hair bobbing as they clutched purses and whispered excitedly about Jean's Hailey finally doing it. The bell over the door jingled for the first time at 8:01. I'll never forget the way Mrs. Dempsey walked in, slow, reverent, like she was stepping into a church. She wrapped me in a hug before I could even say hello. "She's here, you know," she whispered. "She's watching." I blinked fast, smiled, and handed her the first official cup of tea brewed at Jean's house. It didn't take long for the place to fill. The hum of voices, the clinking of mugs, the smell of cinnamon scones in the oven, it was everything I had pictured and more. People found corners to read, caught up with friends at the long communal table, and left notes on the corkboard I'd put up by the door titled, "Things Jean Taught Me." By noon, it was covered. Around that time, Tessa showed up. I saw her through the window first, standing there with something in her hands, biting her lip, looking like she might bolt. She stepped inside and hesitated, scanning the room until her eyes landed on me. She walked over slowly, holding out a brown paper bag. "It's lemon loaf," she said. "From Green and Gold." I raised a brow. "You used to hate them." She shrugged. "Turns out they've grown on me." I took the bag and nodded toward an empty stool at the counter. "You wanna sit?" She did. And for an hour, she just sat. Sipped tea. Watched. Said nothing and everything all at once. Before she left, she reached into her coat pocket and slid something across the counter. A napkin. Folded into a small square. After she left, I unfolded it. She'd be proud. Tea. I stared at it for a long time, tears blurring the letters. Then I went into the back room, pulled open the drawer where I kept Grandma's notes and recipes, and tucked the napkin inside. Because it belonged with the rest of the legacy. In the weeks that followed, Jean's house grew into more than a cafe. It became a refuge. We had community nights, poetry readings, even a little shelf where people could pay forward a drink for someone having a rough day. One evening, I stayed late after closing, lights dimmed, the scent of chamomile still lingering in the air. I sat by the window with a cup of Grandma's Garden Blend and looked out at the moon. And for the first time since she passed, I felt full. Not whole. Not healed. But full. Of purpose. Of peace. Of the quiet kind of joy that Grandma always carried, steady, quiet, unshakable. She hadn't just left me a house. She left me a foundation. And now, every person who walks through that door, every story shared over tea, every small kindness passed from one table to another, it all grows from the seed she planted. She prepared me for this. Not to win. But to become.